I had my own garage, you know, downtown. Quam Motor Company. But I was born and raised on a farm. I'm just naturally mechanically inclined. So we had all kinds of machinery, from thresher machines to silo fillers and trucks of all kinds. So when I was in high school, I was overhauling cars for people in town in my corn crib. You know, you heard of corn crib mechanics. Well, anyway, that was it. And then I went to California, and after I lost this eye, I was an airplane mechanic out there. And then after I lost the eye, I ran a garage in Highland Park, which is north of downtown Los Angeles. And then I came back here and bought that little garage at 120 South Duff, and operated that for many, many years. I quit the trade, I think, in about 1970 or so. Then I went into moving houses and making apartments, stuff like that. Because garage business is pretty hard on your back. And it's a wonder that I can walk at all, because I walked on cement for years. And that usually gets you. Some guys are luckier than I. Some people have wives that can't wait to polish and clean and so on. Well, she's done her share of polishing and cleaning, and she kind of likes him, but if I didn't have him, I'm sure our relationship would be maybe a little better. But it's a great hobby. It keeps you out of the beer joints, you know. You don't make any money at it, that's for sure, but it's fun. You know, you get in them and all of a sudden you can put them in gear, step on the foot, feet, and away you go. And they're all different, you know. The big cars, in those days, they never had power steering or power brakes. And so when you see a movie star like Mitzi Gaynor, for instance, she's popular in those days, in the middle 30s, she's standing beside her big Cadillac or Packard. The implication is that she drives that car. She couldn't push the clutch pedal down. I don't think she could even reach it. You know, it takes a horse and a half. That's why they had chauffeurs in those days. They have a big husky guy to drive the car. I've got cars that when they're moving down the road, you're all right, but if you go to park them, it takes a lot of muscle. That big Pierce Arrow that I have, I took it on that Iowa trip, and I had had heart surgery 3 weeks before that, and you're not supposed to even hardly ride in the car for 6 weeks. And I was driving that darn thing, and you'd get into parks and stuff, and around trees and so on. It's a wonder I ever lived. And then when I seen my doctor, when I went in for a checkup, I kidded the doctor. I said, I sure blew a hole in your theory that you had to be 6 weeks dormant after a heart operation, because I did it in 3 weeks on the biggest car and heaviest car in the world. You're like driving an old tractor. Or if you got a modern car and the engine dies and the power steering quits, that's about how hard these old cars steer. Unless they're little cars like Fords and Chevrolets, they're easy to drive.
A lot of people looking at you when you go down the road?
Well, sometimes. I went up to northern Iowa and northern Minnesota and bought a 29 Plymouth sedan, which is kind of plain Jane. It's nicer than a Ford, but, you know, nothing to write home about. And I remember that trip, it really struck me because I was on the interstate coming down, and I'd be on the north one going, the north part of the interstate going south, and people would be on the other side going north across the median, and they'd roll down the windows and holler and yell and wave. You'd think I was driving a Rolls Royce or something. But some of the more modern cars I got that I think are beautiful cars, nobody gets too excited. Once in a while, you do. The last 10 years, cars, unless they got a name on them, you don't know one from the other, hardly, unless you're really in the game. But the old cars, it was great when I was young. I was so interested in cars from the time I was a little boy. And about every year something new. They used to only have two-wheel brakes. All of a sudden they had four-wheel brakes. Then they had hydraulic brakes. And then they'd had a shift on your hand, you know. And then about 1939, they had three on the tree, they called it. Your shift lever was up on under the steering wheel. And the outside looks was different all the time. Almost every year it was something different. And they changed engines. They went to overhead valves and big V8s. It's been a really interesting time to grow up if you like cars. So maybe that's why some people like the old cars. They're so different.
What do you think is going to happen to your collection?
Well, that's a good question, and anybody with common sense would be concerned about it. But I have three sons, and they all like old cars. They've got some old cars of their own. Of course, they're mostly newer vintage than these. But I suppose they'll have a big auction and sell them off. My dad was a horseman, and he loved horses and stuff. And when they had the closing out sale, he was ill. He couldn't go out and watch the horses sold. But he sat in the house on a chair near the window, and he was so attached to those horses that tears were rolling down his cheek. While he watched his horses sold, I will be around when the cars are sold, so I don't need to worry about that. I'm so damn sentimental, I hate it. One of the main